Hello, everyone. Welcome to our PCMH Fireside Chat, where we are going to talk with a team of peer supporters from various organizations about summer planning and how to think about your summer in a different way for your youth who will be home because they're either not interested in going to summer camps anymore or there aren't any available because they've aged out. So we have a variety of folks with us tonight with lived experience. And I'm going to introduce everyone to you now. So again, my name is Vicki, and I'm the Family Partnership Program Manager with Children's Mental Health Ontario, and I support the Parents for Children's Mental Health Peer Support Program. And we offer peer support across the province. And I'm going to introduce you to our volunteer peer supporter, Crystal Becker. If you want to give a little wave, thanks, Crystal, who comes to us from Burlington. And Crystal is a mom of two boys with disabilities whose personal experiences with peer support became a lifeline during difficult times. So, having grown up in a family affected by mental health and addiction, Crystal understands the power of connecting with others who've walked a similar path. And now she's giving back as a peer support chapter leader with the Burlington PCMH chapter and also sits on the Family Advisory Council for the Knowledge Institute. She's also training in Indigenous wisdom and trauma recovery through Grandmother's Voice and is a program coordinator for All Abilities All Stars, which is a nonprofit leading inclusive and ability-focused spaces. Crystal's passionate about reducing stigma, improving access to services, and advocating for holistic, compassionate support. Thanks for being here, Crystal. And next up, I'd like to introduce Andrea Garnett, who is coming from Interwoven Connections Peer Support. And Andrea is a community and social service worker with over 20 years of experience supporting individuals and families in both frontline and supervisory roles in residential and day treatment, as well as child welfare and foster care systems. Andrea has significant experience working with clients facing ADHD, ASD, ODD, FASD, all of the acronyms, dual diagnosis, cognitive impairments, and at-risk youth. Andrea is also a mother to 6 kids, including 3 through the public adoption system, 2 bonus children, and 1 biological child. Thanks for being here, Andrea. And last but not least, Pamela McPhee-Maranuzzi from PLEO Peer Support, sorry. And Pamela has been with PLEO since 2021 and has a background in psychology and social work, as well as personal experience as a parent herself. Pamela is a team lead on the helpline that PLEO offers and brings a wealth of experience, having supported countless families through a wide range of situations involving children and youth facing mental health and substance use challenges. As a caregiver, Pamela has spent the past 17 years walking beside her daughter, advocating for and teaching her daughter how to advocate for herself as they navigate the mental health system. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Very much appreciated. I'm going to just lead us into some questions to start the discussion for us tonight. All of us here tonight have had experience working with families, specifically parents and caregivers who might be feeling overwhelmed by what to do this summer when their youth either doesn't want to go to camp or there isn't any available options that they're aware of. So I'd like to know kind of where to start or what to do. And Pamela, I'm going to go to you first on this. I'm wondering what you can offer us.
So, the situation can definitely feel very overwhelming. It is important that you work in partnership and collaboration with your youth as you plan for the summer break. Ask curious questions, such as what would you like to do? What are some activities you're interested in doing? Or what does summer break look like for you? Working together with them ensures buy-in and gives them a sense of having control or a say in what their summer can look like for them.
Absolutely. That's definitely an important factor, right? Because they're old enough now, they have a say, they have wishes, they have wants, right? And needs. So thank you for starting us off with that point. It's a good one. Andrea, I'd like to go to you next and ask you about your thoughts.
Well, first of all, I just would want to greet everybody with some empathy and an understanding and knowing that there are so many families and parents who are struggling with the summertime and the long breaks, my own family included, trying to figure out what resources that you can pull together. So I would say that something really important is also to be able to take that time out for yourself and manage your own self-care so that when you're at your best, you can then plan best for your kids.
That's great. That's really important. I appreciate that point as well. And Krista, what about you? Any last words on this?
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, and not knowing where to start kind of leaves you a little stuck. And so, kind of similar to what Andrea just mentioned, that self-care piece, remembering to breathe and like take breaks for yourself, and also try to lean on others. So we have peer supports that exist so that you don't have to carry anything alone. You feel alone, but you're not alone.
Hmm.
And try not to compare your journey to others, as progress looks different for every single human being. And if all you do today is keep showing up, then that's more than enough. Your kids will see you, and it's really important to be that person for them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I love that sort of lean in on others, right? And that progress looks different. So we often compare ourselves, whether it's on social media or just friend to friend or the other parent on the playground or at the school parking lot, whatever. We're constantly faced with that. So I really appreciate that point. Thanks, Crystal. Andrew, I'm going to come to you next for this next question, just to start us off. What has your experience been with supporting families in managing this situation?
I think one of the main struggles for families is that a lot of times both parents need to be working, or in a situation where it's a single parent, that person is not able to take off the entire summer, plus March break, plus Christmas break, and the stress of trying to figure out what you're going to do with your kids over this time. So for myself, I know something that's been really important is really trying to also balance my own work schedule so that I can plan some of the days off that I'm able to take, try to arrange my meetings around some of the things my kids are doing, taking vacation when I can, breaking up the vacation from full weeks to a couple of days a week so that I have more time that I can spend with my kids and a little bit less
Hmm.
time that I have to be so stressed and worried about what's happening at home.
Absolutely. Because that's very real, right? And sometimes we end up making decisions based in that stress or worry rather than kind of being able to think clearly. So it's a really good point. All of those pressures are on us. So I appreciate that. Crystal, what about yourself? What advice would you like to give in terms of what your experience been with supporting families in this situation?
Yeah. I know advocacy is number one and has been number one for myself, and then also in supporting others. And so building those self-advocacy skills and finding community-based supports, you never know until you ask, right? And if there's one thing that I've tried to lean into is keep asking. I know it can diminish capacity at times, but even just setting small, meaningful goals that foster your own confidence can really be beneficial. And one of the most effective approaches is to practice navigating familiar routines, routes, and spaces
Mm,
within your own community well before your kids need to do it independently. So, an example for me is when my son began using public transit, we plan, write the route together
yeah,
using Google Maps. In Burlington, we have an app called Plan My Ride. And so there's lots of cool little tools within different services that are free. And I would help him kind of almost like pre-navigate, right? Learn which
yeah,
bus numbers to take and look for, and then do the route. I would let him get on the bus and I'd be like a phone call away if need be. And then he got to practice safely, knowing that he'd be supported. And then also just reminding him to, ask a bus driver if you're not sure, ask somebody, right? Reminding that most of the people in the community, we do have helpers, right? And people like bus drivers are there and happy to help. Your local community supports can really build that safety net for yourself and for your family.
hmm Amazing. Thank you so much. Pamela, I'm going to come to you actually with our next question. What are some of the challenges that you've seen families facing in planning summer activities, especially once kids age out, of summer camps or programs in their area?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges is who is going to stay with that youth and keep an eye on them while that parent or caregiver has to be out of the house working. Or even
Hmm.
sometimes some families, even if they have the luxury of being able to work from home remotely still, it's still how are they being watched and who is occupying their time. And so this is a real dilemma for many families. I would say another big challenge is how to keep the youth occupied. Parents and caregivers worry about their youth spending the entire day on their electronic devices. So scrolling social media, gaming, or binge watching some of those movies and TV shows. So that's another really big concern as well that I found, and how to have those conversations to help them plan for the day so this is not occurring day in and day out.
Absolutely important to remember that. I think screens are a worry that many of us in this generation of parenting are carrying with us. So thank you for that, Pamela. Andrea, what about yourself? What challenges have you seen families face?
I think one of the major ones is probably financial resources. Even if there are loads of programs that are available in your area, some of them are just not achievable for us. And if you have more than one child or more than one child with special needs, it's very difficult to be able to direct the family finances to that type of programming. And that's
Yeah,
if you get on the wait list early enough to be able to even have that option for your child. Another one I would say is your kids' resistance to wanting summer planning, especially for our transitional aged youth and, our preteens who maybe don't want to go to summer camp or think that's too babyish or all their friends aren't doing that. And you're trying to navigate some of those challenges when you know that your kids need support and are not fully independent, but finding that balance between allowing them to be as independent as they can be, still in a safe way.
absolutely. I remember going through that with my youngest son, who I felt was not ready to be done with summer camps yet, but he had zero interest. And so having those conversations is definitely important and can also still provide or still prove to be a bit of a challenge, right? If they're resistant to the ideas that you have. So it's navigating that. So that's a very real challenge for many families. So I appreciate you pointing that out along with that financial challenge as well. Crystal, what about from you in terms of your experience?
I like to speak to, I guess I have two kids, so one is 19 and one is 7, right? So I find that when they age out of the pediatric system between
Yeah,
18 and 21, they face a really steep drop in supports and mental health programs, recreational supports, school-based services, respite options often become a lot more difficult to access. And it's also just a whole new system that you have to re-navigate again. They also lose out on trusted professionals that they've built relationships with. So there's transitional aged youth time, right, where they're just shifting, and it can be really, really confusing for them. And you're going to experience longer wait lists again. Right? Increased responsibility, a lot of less flexibility, which can in turn lead them backwards, right, into isolation, anxiety, and regression in their skills or mental health. So yeah, the planning is so important. And yeah, leaning into those supports around you.
that is definitely a very real challenge for a lot of families. And, not only with neurological differences, but, other disabilities, physical disabilities, developmental disabilities. I think we all recognize on screen how real of a challenge that absolutely is. So thank you for really digging into that, because I think that what did you call it, the steep drop, right, that service cliff, I think that's also very real. And I think folks don't realize not only do the youth experience that, but the parents and caregivers experience that, right? Because now, like you said, we're navigating a whole new landscape. So speaking of landscape, I'm curious, now that we've kind of addressed what some of the typical challenges are, and we've talked about what our experience has been with supporting families, I'm going to come to you first, Crystal, on this one about what some of the resources are that families could consider seeking out in their area.
I mean, I like to lead with things like 311. I know that's Ontario, but also in your local area, there's usually a number, a 3-digit number that you can call to the general directory. But employment skills centers are really fantastic. They usually have a little bit of something for everyone, including transitional age youth supports. And whether that's employment or even just volunteer, really great way to keep them occupied. Quite often they have programs that are buffered with teaching them that skill development, and then they couple it with a co-op potentially. Your local neighborhood, I don't know how many are familiar with, their neighbors, right? But we have a very diverse dynamic where I live, and that there are elderly around and other people that might need some supports around the house or in the yards. Coupling that youth with the elderly can sometimes work really, really wonderfully. Local libraries are also another fantastic resource, and like community centers. And then there's a few different helplines that can be really beneficial. So Connects Ontario has 24/7 helpline for mental health addictions and community services. PCMH, shout out, Parents for Children's Mental Health. We have caregiver support groups across Ontario. So not just where I am, but all across Ontario, and offering one-to-one support services and youth wellness hubs. Youth wellness hubs are youth-led mental health and wellness hubs here in Ontario, and ages 12 to 25. So those are a few really great resources that can be accessed all in Ontario.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Crystal. And on that note around peer support, I'll pass it over to Pamela from PLEO, Pamela, even if you could tell us a bit about the helpline, that would be helpful, but then also dig into what other resources that maybe Crystal hasn't mentioned that you would like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know Crystal has mentioned the local community centers. There's also the YMCAs, libraries. I know you've also said, it's really about trying to find what are drop-in programs, because the youth, maybe they're not interested in this full-on locked-in. I know my children hated the locked-in summer programs, right? So maybe they may be open to doing a drop-in and attending that a few times a week throughout the summer months. Volunteer opportunities. Maybe they'd be interested in volunteering at a local animal shelter or a hospital for a few hours a week. This could also help the youth accumulate those, high school volunteer hours that they need to get in before they graduate. Also, there's like posting an ad at your college or university to hire a student for the summer, perhaps a summer, developmental services student or a child youth worker student, or approaching an EA currently already working in your child's school and asking them if they're interested in summer work. This person can teach your child valuable social skills and life skills while spending time with your youth in their home and in that community. And of course, there's PLEO, our helpline, which is available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And it's just a place where parents can call in to have a safe, non-judgmental place to talk about their current challenges. We can be your sounding board. We can help you problem solve. And we're also there to help connect you to resources that we think might be helpful to either you and or your child.
That's amazing. Thanks, Pamela. I think just to give a shout out to those EAs, because I have a friend that did do that work on the side through the summer with some of her students that she, built that trust with. The student trusted her, the family trusted her, and that proved to be an amazing support for that family because she had time with that child once or twice a week through the summer. And I think that's a great suggestion for folks to consider if there are those connections that already exist. Try to tap into them, right? So thank you for that. So many great points. So Andrea, I'm just going to turn to you to see if you have anything to add on that.
Similarly to what Crystal and Pamela said about the community centers and even the activity rooms that are at the community centers, where they have to drop in for video games and table tennis, different led but fairly independent activities. That's a great opportunity using your public pool because it's a lower cost option. It's a lifeguarded event. In my community, the John Howard Society does run a lot of youth programs as well. And the HRDC offers different, even paid programs where teens and those transitional age youth can take an employment program and earn a little bit of money. And it takes up several hours through the day. So it keeps them occupied for a good amount of time. And then just
That's important.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Resourcing even like maybe local churches or food banks that might be looking for volunteer. And maybe for some of the kids that just need a little bit of additional support, you could also contact your local high school or some of the EAs, the CERTs, and see if there's any real, like really strong peers that are looking to also get their own volunteer hours. And maybe they could come and volunteer a few hours a week doing some one-on-one activities with your kids, and it's beneficial to you and it's also beneficial to the person receiving the community hours.
Yeah, another great suggestion. And I think really, thanks for that, Andrea. It comes down to looking at what relationships already exist that you can leverage and kind of really use in a different way. So be creative and think outside of the box. And you have to feel comfortable with that. So we're certainly not suggesting just hire a stranger. That's not what we're suggesting, but we're suggesting try to build on the relationships you already have at the school, right? The educators sometimes know who those kids are that are looking for those opportunities, and they might be able to make some recommendations. So you're wanting to really connect and make those decisions in that way where you're thinking it, through, and you're connecting with people and trust. So many great suggestions here. I want to dig a bit more into what we should keep in mind about our own worries as parents and caregivers. We touched on it a little bit because we tend to sometimes make decisions from that place of worry. So I'm kind of wanting to just dig into that a little bit as caregivers. How do we manage our own needs while we worry about the summer? And as the summer's going along, what are some things we can kind of do to help ourselves? Pamela, I'm going to pop over to you first on this one.
So, first off, it's natural to feel anxious or worried about your youth being home alone or not attending a camp, perhaps for the first times. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with them? I remember my son all hated all camps as well. And so this was a thing that I went through. And it's that pressure. What am I going to do? How am I going to fill the hours of the day? How am I going to keep them occupied? So I think in this case, it's reminding yourself that you do not need to schedule every day or every moment of that summer break. Okay, youth need and may also want downtime. For many, school is a challenge. And so the summertime for them is a time to decompress and to not feel the pressure of assignments or engaging in activities. So I'm going to say lean into a little bit of that, take some of that pressure off yourself, take yourself out of that pressure cooker. Because when we don't feel under pressure, I find we can show up a lot better as a parent.
That's a great point. And I think when we're talking about adding structure and routine, we're also saying it's really important to have some unstructured time, right? Because that is sometimes where learning and comfort takes place for them. So I appreciate that balance and you talking about that and the natural feeling of anxiety that we're having as well. So thank you for that. Crystal, what about yourself? Anything to add to that?
I think you'll hear similarities through all the peer support lens, right? Because obviously validation is number one, right? So our worries are valid, but they're also like a reminder that they're ours to work through because being a little bit mindful, it's okay for us to feel overwhelmed and uncertain or afraid, but our children do pick up on our energy. So sometimes if you can practice that with a trusted adult, so then that way it doesn't trickle over to your kids, because kids naturally don't want to disappoint you, and they can pick up on that even if we're not realizing it, right?
True enough.
When we take our time to, regulate ourselves, find our supports, we're showing them versus telling them what to do, because kids innately follow versus listen to what they're told, right? So we don't ever need to be perfect. We just need to be real and modeling that self-care and problem solving and asking for help. You're giving your child permission to do the same. So the way we show up for ourselves can be the strongest form of support that we can offer our kids.
Absolutely. And showing up for ourselves is just as important as showing up for them. So I love how you said that. That's beautiful. Thank you for that, Crystal. And Andrea, I think you've got a couple of great tips as well for folks to consider.
You know what? One of the things I really wanted to say was just encouraging people to connect with their online communities, even if it's not in person. So, everybody that came here today, like this is a great step towards your own self-care and figuring out how to plan for the summer with other people who have shared lived experiences. It's so important because we've all been through it before too and are continuing to go through it as we're entering into the summer too. And then just another little tip I was going to say is for some of us that are planning to do some more independent things with our kids this summer, now is the time. Even as early as the March break, you could start planning leaving your kids alone for, periods of time, having check-ins, using their, phones or their smart devices to set alarms and times and helping them to build some independence and you to be able to build that trust with your kids before you're right in the thick of the summer too.
Absolutely. Those are great examples of things to kind of keep in mind right now, right? As we're in June, start building that up and even next year, starting a little earlier. So I appreciate those tips as well. And speaking of tips, actually, I think we will wrap up sort of this part of our evening together. I'd love to ask you all what some of your top tips are for helping families managing the needs of their young people staying home for summer. So I'm going to come to you for 2 to 4 ideas that you can share. And I want to let folks know that we're also developing a top resource sheet that we'll be sharing. And if you aren't here during this webinar and you're watching it after, you can reach us at support@pcmh.ca to get a copy of that resource as well. So reach out anytime for that. But Andrea, I'll come to you first on this. What would be some of your top tips?
Something I've seen a lot, even on social media and in discussion in other parent groups, is again the whole piece of social media and not wanting our kids to be on video games and stuff all day. And loads of people, myself included, create a list for the day. So have you done these things first? Have you done a chore? Whatever, you could itemize what it is. Have you read a book? Have you been outside for half an hour? Once you've done these things, then you can go on the internet or on YouTube or playing on the computer and stuff. So just some things to break up their day a little bit, maybe posting a schedule or an activity schedule, just so your kids are able to kind of have a bit of what to expect for the day. So, starting with breakfast and taking a shower and then building in things into the daytime so that they can visually kind of get the cue. And then, like I had said before, using the smart devices and stuff, you so easily now set up alarms and times and prompts so that you're not having to call your kids every hour to see what they're doing or remind them to do the next thing. And it builds that little bit of trust and independence with the kids too.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. I'm smiling so large when you mentioned showers because my boys are 18 and 21 now. So they are at a point where they're able to be independent. But my goodness, those early days of summers without plans and the showers just becoming less and less important and the teenage boy smell becoming more and more prominent in my home, it just takes me back. And it's hard to get people into that routine if they're out of it, right? And even for myself, when COVID hit, I mean, those are the things that sometimes slide because you're comfortable and you're hanging out. And so really important to keep some of those routines in place. So those are some great tips. Crystal, what about you?
To add to all of that, having safety plans have been really helpful tool to know what to do if there is an emergency. All right, so helping to prepare that list with them. I always say you're better off to leave with a lot of these things with your child. So then that way, that's just that building those skills for them. So including, the emergency phone numbers and a place where they can access them. And then another thing that I would do is prepare either written instructions or make a little video, find a little video on YouTube to help them with things that they might need a little bit of help with. So sometimes you can utilize the things that they're interested in to get the buy-in, to have them buy into, okay, like I see that kid doing that. Okay, maybe I'll try it. And also just like music, obviously, like music and kind of attaching, something that they enjoy into that visual or written instructions, and then connecting with other families that get it through any of our peer support programs, because yeah, we all need that breather. We all need to come up for air, and it can get overwhelming and stay on top of you, right?
I appreciate that mention as well. I mean, even something, for example, having a safety plan, like you mentioned, those are some of the things that we tend to maybe not think about when we're in it. And when you can connect with other families and other parents, you kind of talk about these things. Those are the things you tend to get help with, or those little day-to-day things that you don't see right in front of you because you're not thinking about that. You're doing all kinds of other things. And I think back to when I was a kid, we had phone lines, we had a landline, and the phone numbers for, the neighbor or whoever the safety people were on the fridge, and I knew where to get that. Today is so different. So if your kids don't have a phone, or you don't have a landline anymore, then it's about figuring out that way that they can access you through the internet, or maybe they do have a phone. But having that in place is something I think that has shifted and looks different for us in this generation of parenting. So thank you for pointing that out. Pamela, I'm going to come to you to wrap up our top tips. What would you add to this amazing list?
I think I would add, on top of everything else that's already been said, involving your youth in the process.
Yeah.
This can include the planning the activities together, the shopping for or planning the meals, or, prepping the meals together. This ensures that all important buy-in that we've all talked about and that we all want to have. It makes them feel like they're part of that process, which we all know kids love doing. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to feel like they're part of it, and they want to feel like they have some control over that. We've already talked about organizing the day. I'm going to shout out to that again because it's very important to have those calendars, visual schedules. And then I think the big one is building your support network, reaching out to trusted neighbors, family members, and or friends who can check in on your child or youth, either in person, virtually, or by phone. Be there for them in case of an emergency, or perhaps even spending some time with them during the summer.
Absolutely. Those are amazing top tips. And as I mentioned previously, we're going to be putting those along with other suggestions into a resource that we'd love to share out. So please get in touch with us at support@pcmh.ca. For those of you joining us today, we will automatically be sending that to you when it's ready to go. So we just want to say a big thank you to Andrea, Crystal, and Pamela for joining us tonight for our fireside chat. And we hope that you will all continue to hang around with us. And thank you for listening in.